Hi, it's Jan Beta, and we're going to take a look at the new mechanical keyboard for the Amiga 1200 from AmigaStore.eu today. This is a full drop-in replacement mechanical keyboard for the Amiga 1200, sold by AmigaStore.eu for a couple of days now. It's pretty recently been made available. And full disclosure, this was sent to me for free by AmigaStore.eu and Sergiusz, who designed this, to review it. So that's what we're going to do. If you are subscribed to this channel, then maybe you saw this keyboard that I made a video about 3 years ago, or thereabouts, before. And it's basically the same thing. This one I've had for around 3 years, as I said. It was handmade by Sergiusz, who designed the whole thing, and it is basically the same construction as the keyboard that is now commercially available from AmigaStore. This started out as a very small-scale hobbyist project by Sergiusz, and he offered to make these on his website and sold some of them. And then the demand very quickly spiked, so he took the buy link off the website and got in touch with a professional maker of Amiga-related items, which was AmigaStore. And then it took them quite a long time to actually make this fit for larger scale production. Of course, you have to comply with all kinds of EU regulations if you want to sell something like this for real from a shop, and they had to work out quite some problems regarding that. The design basically stayed the same. There were some adjustments, but the video I made about this 3 years ago, for the most part, everything I said there applies to the new keyboard as well, just that it's now available on a larger scale, which is great. Because this is a really nice keyboard, and I've used this in this Amiga 1200 since I got it, basically, and never looked back to the original wobbly keyboard. So let's take a look at the commercial version of the product. The production model, basically. The other one, I think it was kind of a prototype stage. This is the actual thing. Same mechanisms. I think these are blue switches, just like the ones that I have in the one I've had for a while now. Let's take this out and take a closer look. So this is a fully mechanical, complete replacement for the original Amiga 1200 keyboards. It comes with the metal backplate, which they also produce for these now. For the original thing that I've shown in the previous video, you needed the original backplate from an original keyboard, but now they have a backplate that is an exact replica of the original one. Should fit the Amiga 1200s just fine. And as far as I can see, this is still a 2 PCB construction, with the switches soldered to the top PCB and the bottom PCB kind of just a stabilizer, and all the magic kind of happens on the top side. The metal chassis is available in 2 colors. This is the black version. There's also one that is silver, like bare metal. This is galvanized steel, actually, so it is the same material they used for the original keyboard metal chassis. Yeah, this is quite heavy because it's 2 circuit boards and has proper switches for each key. So the original keyboards are just a membrane keyboard with a plastic holder for the keys, basically, and a membrane underneath that feeds out a little flat flex on this end here. This is a proper flat flex cable, which fits the original connector on the Amiga 1200 PCB. And this feels so much nicer than the original keyboards, which are kind of standard keyboards for the home computers of the time, the early 1990s, when the Amigas were released. They're basically the same as the Amiga 500 keyboards, the original ones. And this is just a proper keyboard in all respects. The production version here seems to also be modifiable in the same way that the handmade version was, so you can modify some things slightly. This has a secondary control key here, which you can configure with some jumpers, and you can also configure an LED that is under the caps lock key to be in another position here. In the standard configuration, this control key is exactly the same as the other original position control key here. But you can use this key for controlling something else even. You have like solder pads here for connecting this key to something like maybe switching a memory expansion, kickstart switch, boot selector. Your imagination is the limit for that. This is just a switch. So you can use that in different ways if you take this apart and solder some extra wires to this, which is quite remarkable given that this is a commercial product now, and you can still modify it to your needs. Another thing that you can modify still, as I can see from here, is that the spacebar, you can actually put more than one switch under that to have more rigidity basically, but this is pretty rigid in this configuration. All these larger keys have proper stabilizers and things like that, so it's the same as your modern gaming mechanical keyboard that you can buy these days in that regard, so a pretty solid keyboard. The switches are Kale switches. You can get these from Amiga Store with red switches, which are linear. You can use blue switches, which are these. These are the clicky mechanical ones. And you can also have brown switches, which I believe have the same pressure you need to activate them, but are less clicky than the blue ones. I kind of like the blue ones because they are so different from the original feel, and you can actually hear them clicking quite nicely. Yeah. These are manufactured in-house by AmigaStore.eu, so made in the EU. Probably the PCBs and the steel backplate are outsourced somewhere, but they are at least assembled in Spain, where AmigaStore.eu is located. That is pretty cool. These come with the US or international layout, but that is actually not that much of a big deal because originally this was made to be customized. So Sergiusz designed in these two blank keycaps, and the keycaps are all standard XDA profile keycaps with an MX stem for the switches. So you can quite easily have a customized keycap set also in different colors. Unfortunately, these are only available in this color from Amiga Store at this point. Maybe they are going to offer different colors in the future. These are just white XDA profile keycaps in the US layout. That's all that's available at this point. And I actually don't mind that because I got used to the US layout from numerous other retro computers. Although with my Amigas, I have mostly ones that have the German layout, which is quite a bit different. But judging by my experience with my other Amiga 1200, which has the US layout with this keyboard, I got used to that pretty quickly. So it's not a big deal, really, if you are not like writing a book on your Amiga or something like that, which is completely possible, but I'm not doing that. I'm just using it to run shell commands or things like that. So not that much typing going on for me. You need to get used to this a bit, but the general layout is pretty much the same as the original Amiga keyboard, just that the spacebar is slightly shorter to accommodate for this extra control key, which, as I said, can be customized to some other function. The Amiga keys are a bit larger than the original ones, but yeah, this is actually closer to the layout that you would have on a modern PC than the Amiga layout. I don't mind it at all. The color is white because it is really difficult to find these off-the-shelf keycaps in an Amiga color, which is slightly off-white, even for the Amiga 1200s usually. Plus, the Amiga 1200 is yellowed. Pretty much all of them are yellowed these days, but you can get replacement cases for the Amiga 1200, as you probably know, and these should go really well with the all-white new Amiga 1200 case or other colors of cases that you can get from a 1200 net, actually. The production quality of this seems to be excellent, and I do recommend Amiga Store in general because I've bought everything I've bought. I didn't buy much from them, but everything I bought was high quality, and I didn't have any problems whatsoever with them so far. And they are also very friendly people. Got some friendly email correspondence with them when they sent this out to me. So yeah, I highly recommend AmigaStore.eu. Although they are not sponsoring this video in any way, they just sent me this to review upon Sergiu's request, because I was in very frequent email contact with Sergiusz back when I reviewed the handmade version. He's a friendly person as well. So thank you, Amiga Store and Sergiusz, for making this possible and letting me show this to the audience. That's you. Currently this is available for 185 euros, complete with keycaps, switches, the custom backplate here, which I think is a very reasonable price given how much the parts themselves cost and given how much a relatively small scale, I assume, production run of these custom metal parts and the circuit boards cost. I think it's a reasonable price compared to other modern mechanical keyboards that are available these days, and especially comparing this to an original Amiga 1200 keyboard that is tested and things like that from eBay, for example. The pricing, as you probably know, for all things vintage computing these days are through the roof, I'd say, to put it mildly. So yeah, if you have a broken Amiga 1200 keyboard or one that is very badly yellowed, or you just don't like the feel of the mushy membrane keyboards, this is worth considering. I'm going to try to put this in an Amiga 1200 now and show you how that looks. And we're going to actually see if it works. I'm not sure. I've not tried this yet, as you can tell. So here's my Amiga 1200 that I want to put this in. And as you can probably see, even on camera, this is pretty yellow still, even after retro brighting this. And it actually re-yellowed quite a bit. But yeah, it is the case from my original Amiga 1200 that I had back in the day, my Amiga 1200, and also the keyboard from my Amiga 1200 that I used quite a lot back then. And this is how the keyboards compare. You can see quite a bit of color difference. So if you have a yellowed Amiga 1200 case, maybe this looks kind of odd, but I'm still going to put that in there just to make clear how that looks. This kind of qualifies as a typical Amiga 1200 these days without any work done to it. Yeah, we're going to put this in there. Shouldn't be much effort really, it's just a drop-in replacement for the original one. Actually, one main difference is that the printing on the special keys here is quite a bit larger on the new keyboard, and of course the caps lock key doesn't have a little cutout because that would probably be way too expensive. It just has an LED underneath that lights up when you activate the caps lock, similar to what the LED in this does, but this has a little window for the LED, which is of course a bit more elegant, but it's going to work the same. And yeah, comparing these two, I prefer the mechanical switches. Who would have thought? Okay, let's put it in there and see how it looks. So in order to get the keyboard out, you actually have to lift the keyboard connector. There's a little locking mechanism you have to lift, and then you can take this membrane connector out here and the whole keyboard, but we have to feed the connector for the little LED assembly here out of here to feed this through there, and this locks in here with some little tabs here. And this is basically the backplate is the same construction, just with a million more screws, because the new replacement keyboard doesn't need that many screws because of the double layer PCB connection. I think these are connected with 2 screws if this is the same as the prototype that I've viewed here. Yeah, it's 2 little screws here to connect both the PCBs to the backplate. And this should just fit in here like so. Yep, fits perfectly. Yeah, this is exactly the same dimensions as the original keyboards. And of course we have to feed the connector through here, which is not really that much of a big deal. And then we connect this ribbon cable here in our mainboard connector for the keyboard and lock it in place. That should sit in there quite firmly. I think this is a tiny bit thicker than the original membrane connector, but not by much, so it should fit your connector fine. These connectors have a tendency to wear out over time, so you might have to put a little bit of electrical tape or some thin tape to the side of the flat flex that doesn't have the contacts. There's only contacts on one side of this cable here. And a good workaround for keyboards not making good connection is to put a bit of tape on there. I've seen that with original keyboards a lot, and with this one it's not different. But this flat flex feels a bit thicker than the original membrane connector, so it should probably make better contact. Yeah, and this is how it looks. Pretty nice. A bit too wide for this Amiga, but I've told you. It does look a bit off in this particular case because it is quite severely yellowed, but it's still pretty nice. And the keys actually don't protrude any further than the original keys. If anything, they are a bit flatter, which I don't mind because the typing position is a bit more comfortable this way. It's not meant to be an exact replica of the original keyboard, obviously, but it's kind of meant as a modernized version of the original keyboards, which it certainly is. Yeah, the whole machine is actually quite a bit heavier with the new keyboard because, of course, this is a much more rigid construction. And yeah, with the backplate, there's no wobble whatsoever, except for the case wobbling around this. This Amiga currently doesn't have a disk drive. There's another standoff here that holds the keyboard, so it should be even less wobbly if you have that in place. This particular Amiga doesn't have a disk drive at the moment because I don't have a matching disk drive for the Amiga 1200 that works at this point in time. And I'm not actually sure if this Amiga still works because it was the one that I've made a video about that had the recapping going horribly wrong. Let's hope for the best. Okay, power LED comes on, that's a good sign. And the hard disk LED also comes on. And the caps lock LED is green. We're going to take a closer look at that in a second. Yeah, this still appears to work. So here's what the caps lock LED looks like. As I said, it's just an LED underneath there that activates. And you can also put this LED with the little jumpers that I've shown over here between Escape and F1, which kind of makes sense if you have a translucent case or something like that, then the LED is just going to shine through here, but makes more sense with an opaque case to have it underneath the key itself. So yeah, that works well. Let's see if the rest of the keyboard also works. Okay, let's just type something here and it works fine. Yeah. It just works fine. Yeah. This is my startup sequence. And yeah, the keyboard actually works fine and it feels quite amazing, as was to be expected. Actually quite happy with this. Of course, yeah, everything works just like an original keyboard, with the exception of the keys actually sounding better. Does the reset also work? We should now be able to reset this with Amiga control like this, with the secondary control key, which is actually, I don't mind that actually. Yeah, it does a reset. And you can also still do it the old school way. Actually, if you are following this channel, you probably know that I'm a huge fan of new keyboards in old systems. So this is not much different from that. This is just pretty awesome that this exists and you can now buy it. Of course, there are several other options for replacement keyboards for Amiga, some of which I've covered on the channel, some of which I haven't. There are open source projects that are replacing the Amiga 1200 keyboard that you can build yourself at home and order everything you need for that. And there are also other commercial options. This variant is a very nice one. That's all I can say. And I followed this project quite from the beginning, as witnessed by the video I made back then. And it was kind of a long and winding road to bringing this into a production model. And the fact alone that they went through with that, and this is now available, is kind of amazing these days for a system that was released in the 1990s. Who would have thought? And the caps lock LED also lights up very briefly on reset. There. And I guess the only people who use caps lock regularly are the people screaming in online forums and social media. I don't do that very often, but I appreciate that it has such a nice green LED in there. Yeah, actually not much more I can say about this. I could try pulling a keycap and looking at one of the switches underneath. Let's pull the L, and that's a Kale blue switch. Yeah, not much of a surprise there. That's just a standard switch. The keycaps are pretty solid. They are pad printed, so this shouldn't wear off anytime soon. And of course, these are custom printed. There's also the Amiga logo here. So if you want to make your own keyboard layout, you should keep that in mind, that you probably need custom printed ones if you want to replace all the keys. I might actually do that at some point because I'm so used to the German keyboard layout, especially on Amigas. But as I said, this worked fine for me for the time being. I like it a lot. It's a very good option if you have a broken Amiga 1200 keyboard or an Amiga 1200 without a keyboard even. We can now replace the keyboard, the case. Good times for Amiga fans, I'd say. As usual, there are going to be links in the description for the shop page on AmigaStore.eu and also for the original project that is still online, Sergiu's website, which has all the modifications that you can do to this and more details about how to set this up in different ways. Thank you to AmigaStore.eu and especially to Sergiusz, who designed this in the first place and contacted me, and both of them together sent me this to show you. Hope this was interesting and informative. Thank you so much for your time and your likes and your subscriptions, which are apparently pretty important. So if you are not subscribed to this channel and are interested in retro computers and other electronics tinkering, please consider subscribing. Special thanks as usual to everybody who supports me on Patreon or on Ko-fi or on the YouTube channel memberships page. That's it. I'm Jan Beta. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. Yeah.